with a prayer in the heart of the Almighty. Already IMA prayer has been submitted, and we are starting this session with the understanding that idam namama, even this is not mine. This is a God-given opportunity, God-given gift for us to learn something about what is going on in the COVID, in the pathogenesis of COVID. Okay, so this is updated till today morning. So very nice that we are able to see today with all the technologies in place, we can be very updated. So as all of you know, here you can see the nidovirales is the order which has got 4 families under that, and out of which our interest is in Coronaviridae family. Nidovirales, Coronaviridae family, it has got 2 types, subfamilies. One is called the Orthocoronavirinae, the other one is the Torovirinae. So again, we are not too much interested in the Torovirinae now. We don't know, next year we'll get a Torovirus pandemic, but till then we will not get into that. Okay, Orthocoronavirinae is the family, subfamily. Under that there are alpha, beta, delta and gamma coronaviruses. Alpha, beta, delta and gamma coronaviruses. Alpha coronavirus, the commonest alpha coronavirus is your HCoV229E, which is your common cold virus. All of us will be getting coryza, no? That common cold virus is alpha coronavirus. Then you got the beta coronaviruses. Among them, the host of things are there. Human infections are SARS-CoV-1, that is the previous SARS we had around 7-8 years back. Then the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS coronavirus, and today this is called the SARS-CoV-2. Okay, remember the disease is called COVID-19. The causative agent is called the SARS-CoV-2. So there will always be different names for the disease and also for the inciting agent. Here, SARS-CoV-2 is the inciting agent or the virion, and the disease is the COVID-19. This is the most important point that people need to understand. Don't get confused between the two. One is the clinical name, the other is a virological name. Okay. Now, let us get into a little more about this virus and how it occurs. Actually, the SARS-CoV virus, which was the previous SARS-CoV virus, not the COVID-2, which has interacted with Wuhan Hu1 COVID virus. These 2 COVID viruses have co-infected the same animal cell, and the genetic material in them, the RNA has crossed over, and that resulted in the SARS-CoV-2, right? So it is the mutant of the SARS-CoV with some additional genetic material from the Wuhan bat virus. So these 2 have crossed over in the bat, in the animal, and produced SARS-CoV virus, and the present causative agent of COVID-19 is SARS-CoV-2. Okay, that suffices to say that. Now you see a beautiful, very colorful diagram, but the virus is not very colorful in our body, in the sense it produces a lot of havoc for us. And then what we can see here is we have got the spike-like things, and then these are called the spike proteins, and then you have also got the membrane proteins, M proteins, and then the RNA inside single-strand positive sense RNA. I'll tell you what is positive sense, and there is an envelope antigen also. So you can see basically S antigen is the spike antigen, M antigen is the membrane glycoprotein antigen, E antigen is the envelope antigen, and then nucleocapsid protein antigen is the N antigen. Why do you want to know all these things? The vaccine development is mainly against the S protein, and this is the protein through which the virus digs into the tissue cells of the human body. So what is the similarity of this with the genetic sequence to the original SARS-CoV of 8 years back? 80% similarity with that, and remaining 20% is the mutated part. It is also 50% similar to the MERS-CoV. What is MERS-CoV? Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, a highly fatal disease, but luckily it didn't spread as a pandemic. Now, the SARS-CoV-2 has originated in the bat, and the mutation in the spike protein. What is the difference between this and the sort of previous SARS-CoV? That is the mutation here, SARS-CoV-2. The spike protein, there is a D614G mutation. So don't worry about that number and all. There is a spike mutation which caused the present pandemic virus. So spike glycoprotein, yes, interaction with the cell surface of the ACE2 receptors. The spike protein only is the one which interacts with our ACE2 cells of our body. We'll go into a little detail into that. But of course, before that, the glycoprotein M The envelope antigen, they are embedded within the host membrane lipid. A bilayer encapsulating and the helical nucleocapsid comprising of the viral RNA. So you can see here on the top, 10 ORF is written. What is ORF? Open reading frames. Viruses do have what are called the open reading frames. Open reading frames are the regions where the genetic material can be easily sort of read by the host cell as well as by the antibodies, and these are the open reading frames. How many are there? There are 10 ORFs there. Out of the 10 ORFs, the first ORF is very potent, open reading frame. 2/3 of the viral RNA is residing in the first ORF itself. Okay, and this first ORF, 2/3 of the RNA is divided into several subproteins. These are called the non-specific proteins, NSP, the NSP 1 to 6. Why I am telling all these things? Because there is a relation to pathogenesis as well as to treatment. Remaining 1/3 of the ORF contains the S protein, the E protein, the M protein, and the N protein. So what about the other ORFs that are there? We will see in the next slide. So as you can see here, there are several, the 2/3 is the ORF 1A and 1B, and 1/3 of that is contributing to S protein, E protein, M protein, and N protein. In addition to that, there is a 3A ORF, there is a 6 ORF, there is a 7B ORF, 9 and 10. These are useful for vaccine development for us. And basically, the spike protein and the other ORFs are used for vaccine development. Whereas if you look at the virion here, the same structure is shown here also, but there are two important aspects that we need to know. So in the ORF-A, you have NSP3 and NSP5, and in the ORF-B, we have got NSP12 and NSP13. We have now registered that there are 15 or 16 NSPs. Out of that, NSP3, NSP5, NSP12, and NSP13 are the ones which are causing the havoc for us. So NSP3 is the papain-like protease, 3CL protease is NSP5, RNA dependent on RNA polymerase is the NSP12. Okay, the helicase is the NSP13. These are the various mechanisms through which the virus tries to enter our body. So then what happens? The spike protein has to come in contact with the cell. So let us see. The virus replication is unchecked here. Why it is unchecked? Normally, what is the defense we have for the virus? The defense that we have for any viral invasion is interferon production. These interferons are they interfere with the virus. That's why they are called the interferons. How many interferons are there? All the interferons are, there are several interferons. Basically, interferon 1, 2, 1B, and 1A, these are the important interferons. The interferon and interferon stimulating genes. These interferons, they have got a switch. That switch is like our main switch of the house. That is the genetic switch. These are called the ISGs. What this virus does is, cleverly it switches off that ISGs. It goes and puts off the power supply to the interferon production factory. So much so no interferons are produced. How does that happen? NSP1, that is the non-specific protein 1, non-specific protein 3, ORF3B region, open reading from 6 region, open reading from 9 region. All these do this havoc of switching of the genes and then interfering with the interferon production, thus overthrowing the antiviral response of interferon. So we are supposed to ward off the virus right when it attacks us, but then what happens is the interferon production is switched off by these various mechanisms that are listed here. NSP1 inhibits the interferons by 3 mechanisms. 1, by inactivation of the host translational machinery to produce interferons. 2, degradation of the host MRI, which is stimulating the interferon production. 3, inhibiting the signal transduction of STAT1, and disrupting the nuclear factor kappa B signaling. These are all micro level understanding of the molecular biology of it, but nonetheless these are important because we may have a treatment or a sort of a mechanism of interfering with the virus in any one of these ways. So NSP7, NSP15 also act as interferon agonists. ORF3B exerts interferon antagonism through the inhibition of interferon B inhibition, and then IRF3 also inhibits the NF-kappa B. So whatever may be the mechanism, the JK-STAT, the tank binding kinase, all the NSP13, ORF3B, 6, 9, all these things, in one word, they do one thing. they turn off the interferon production. That means the virus replication is unchecked. That is the first step that is happening. Okay. So where is this virus getting grafted? Where does the malarial parasite go and infect? The RBC and the liver cells. Where does the dengue virus go and infect? It goes into the endothelial cells and produces endothelialitis. Okay. Likewise, each particular organism has a predilection for one particular cell or the other. This has got a predilection for the cells which exhibit what are called the ACE2 receptors, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptors. Where are these receptors available? These receptors are available to the maximum in the lung. Maximum, I say 80%. Another 20% are distributed in the remaining tissues of the body. So does the virus cause anything to the other cells which are exhibiting the ACE2 receptors? Yes, it does cause. So that's why they are important. In the lung, the ACE2 receptor cells, the cells which exhibit these receptors are the targets for the SARS-CoV virus. So what does it do? Through the spike protein, it gets attached to the ACE2 receptor, and this pushes the receptor in the process inside. The virus goes there. Then we have to understand what is a positive sense virus. A positive sense virus and a negative sense virus, or you can easily understand. Supposing you want to send a picture of yours to your friend in WhatsApp. If your picture is upside down, what your friend has to do? After downloading the picture, he has to again put it right. So that is what is called a transcription in the language of viruses. If a positive sense virus is there, it doesn't require the tilting again and then reorienting itself and then transcribing, which means it is already ready to be copied into the mRNA. What does it mean? It means there is no other transcription mechanism required along with the virus for replication to start immediately. Influenza virus, for example, is a negative sense virus. So it requires, along with that, it has to take along with that viral transcription mechanism. Then only it can be turned upside down and then it is ready to be read by the mRNA and the copies can be produced. Since this is a positive strand virus, positive sense virus, this is directly, it can be copied in the human system. It enters the nucleus and along with the DNA material of the human body, human cell, it multiplies, replicates and comes out. In the endoplasmic reticulum, it is reassembled into the virus and that becomes a virus particle in a vesicle, and the vesicle breaks open by exocytosis. The virion is thrown out. This is the cycle in which. What is the importance of that? Now we need to know who is opening the door for the attachment of the virus to the ACE2 receptors, our own body. We will come to that in the next slide. Look at this. There are 4 horses, white, red, blue, and green horses. This is called the apocalypse. What is the apocalypse? In the biblical sort of literature or in the Christian mythology, we have the apocalypse, like pralayam. We say pralaya, that is the deluge. Well, the whole world will be dissolved. According to Hindu mythology also, we do have pralaya. In the biblical mythology, pralaya occurs when the 4 horsemen will come and destroy the whole world with their divine or sort of devilish powers, with their extra terrestrial powers. So that is an apocalypse. Why these people have come here? What is the reason? So we want to know and equate this apocalypse to the pralaya that is occurring due to COVID. So here also there are four different mechanisms. As you can see here, the green one, the yellow one, the purple one, and the orange one. So the first one we have already discussed, that is called invading of the virus into the cell. How does it invade? Because interferon response is blunted. Interferon response is switched off. We have seen the several mechanisms why the interferon mechanism is switched off. SARS-CoV infects the ACE2 cells. The ACE2 bearing cells are infected. And there are what are called the PAMPs and DAMPs are produced. What are these? These are chemical molecules, damage-associated molecular protein, pathogen-associated molecular protein. These are produced by the virus. What for? These again go and interfere further with the interferon. If somebody wants to put on the switch, they will go and stand there as guards. No, this is switched off. That's all. It cannot be opened. The DAMP and PAMPs again block the action of the body defenses to turn on the interferon again, so that it cannot be again turned on by the body, and it remains to be turned off. Who is going to defend these fellows? PRRs, pattern recognition receptors. There are what are called the pattern recognition receptors. They look at the pattern and say these are culprits. These are trying to block the interferon, and they recognize the pattern and cut them. But unfortunately, the pattern recognition receptors are attacked by the DAMP and the PAMP. So much so, the guards that we have kept near the switchboard are also killed. So much so, the interferon regulating gene or the switch there is switched off for the time being, as long as the virus is multiplying. So virus is freely multiplying. That is horse number 1. The horse number 2 is the ACE angiotensin mechanism. So this we will go into a little detail. This results in vascular leakage and platelet dysfunction, cytokine formation, and all that. And it also activates the intrinsic pathway by a mechanism called the neutrophil extracellular trap. What is neutrophil extracellular trap? The neutrophils are recruited into the inflammatory site, and these neutrophils, they produce chemicals called the extracellular traps. These are called the NETs. These NETs are released by the polymorphonuclear leukocytes, and this process is called the netosis or netosis. Netosis activates the endothelial cells, activates the platelets, activates the complement system, activates the release proteases that inactivate endogenous anticoagulants. What is the function of the NETs? These NETs interfere with endogenous anticoagulation. We have mechanisms to see that the blood is maintained in the fluid state and does not clot, and these are called the anticoagulant mechanisms. These anticoagulant mechanisms, if they're working well, even if there is a little bit thrombus or coagulation occurring, they will take care of it. But then that is overwhelmed by the inflammatory molecules triggering the neutrophils to secrete the NETs. These NETs produce NETosis, or also called the netosis. This netosis it prevents the endogenous anticoagulants from acting favorably to our body. You see, the second horse is that, and we have to deal a little more with the second horse when we go into the further slides. The third one is the endothelial cells of the lining of the capillaries of the alveoli. When they are infected, there will be endothelial dysfunction. This dysfunction leads to tissue factors, thrombin generation, netosis, and that produces what is called the immune inflammation or thromboinflammation. Thromboinflammation. The fourth mechanism is the AEC means alveolar epithelial cell. ACE is angiotensin converting enzyme containing cell. Alveolar epithelial cells are of two types, pneumocyte 1 and pneumocyte 2. Here, the predominant cell that is affected is the pneumocyte 2. We'll come to that in the next slide. And ECs are endothelial cells. They are apoptosed. They die. Or there is what is called, another term newly coined is called the pyroptosis. That means the cell temperature goes up. With that heat, the cell dies. That is called the pyroptosis. And this is because of the T cell lymphopenia. There is excess cytokines, and these excess chemokines, they deplete the T cells, they deplete the lymphocytes, and that also the chemokines directly act on the AECs, alveolar epithelial cells, and also the endothelial cells of the capillaries, and produce apoptosis and pyroptosis. So mechanism 1, viral replication is unchecked. Mechanism 2, cytokine storm producing vascular leakage, decrease in nitric oxide, and mechanism 3, the netosis causing the thromboinflammation. Mechanism 4, cytokine excess producing dysregulated cytokine production. All four together will result in this. These are the four horses in this pralaya or apocalypse. Okay, these are, not only these are just occurring once, they are dynamic interaction of the vicious loops. One is dynamically perpetuating and worsening the situation. For example, viral multiplication is linked to the ACE, is linked to the endothelial dysfunction, is linked to the cytokine storm. So that's why there is an overlap between those circles that you see there. There's a dynamic interaction of the vicious loops all occurring at once. Like somebody is hit by 4 different problems at the same time, the tissues are rather attacked by in 4 different manners. This is a 4-pronged attack of the COVID on the human system. In literature, there is no other virus which is known to have this sort of havoc on the human system so far, the 4-pronged attack. It may have a viral replication, it may have cytokine, it may have thrombosis, it may have angiotensin, but all together occurring in one shot produces DAD. What is DAD? Diffuse alveolar disease. That is, there will be a diffuse inflammation of the alveoli. And then ALI, acute lung injury, ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, EOD, end organ damage. So DAD, diffuse alveolar disease, acute lung injury, ARDS, and end organ damage all together produce the mortality or very severe disease. They have to fight it out and come out through various mechanisms. This is a nutshell the mechanisms going on. The first one we have dealt in detail using the various NSP1s, NSP3, and also the open reading frames, STAT mechanism, JAK mechanism, all that we looked at. Second, third, and fourth, we need to go a little detail. So we told that the target cell is the angiotensin converting enzyme 2 cell. Interaction between the SARS-CoV-2 and the renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, ACE2 link is linked to, of course, to diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and people who have those diseases, the ACE2 cell is already overwhelmed, and that is why they are more vulnerable for this disease. So ACE2 receptor to get attached to the cell and enter the cell, somebody has to open the door. That door opening is done by this fellow, TMPRSS2, that is called type 2 transmembrane serine protease. Where is it there? This TMPRSS, as you can see here in the upper part of the diagram, TMPRSS is a protein produced from our own cells, and these pulmonary cells, they with their proteases, and it digests the spike protein. There is a cap on the spike protein. That cap is digested. The spike is available. It pierces the ACE2 receptor. In the process, it makes the ACE2 receptor endocytose, or takes the receptor into the cell. So much so the receptor population, it's one virion, one receptor is going. If there are 1,000 million virions, million receptors there are submerged into the cell. See, who is helping? Our own fellow is helping the interaction of the spike protein with the ACE2 receptor. What is the name of that fellow? The culprit? Type 2 transmembrane serine protease, or TMPRSS2. Why do I need to know that? Now, we have got a drug which is acting here, and it is stopping that TMPRSS not to do this work. Rather, it is neutralizing the protease. The protease neutralizing drugs are coming up, and we will be able to win the war in the very first stage itself of the disease. That means the virus is not allowed to enter into the cell. That is a boon if that comes true. As you can see here in the lower part of the diagram, the upper part or the second part of the upper diagram is only viral replication, which we have seen in the previous slide. In the lower part, something interesting is going on. What is that? Here we have got 2 types of cells, as we have already earlier discussed, type 1 pneumocyte and type 2 pneumocyte. Type 1 pneumocyte is the alveolar capillary barrier. One cell of the alveolus, one cell of the capillary, the oxygen is transmitted. And this type 1 pneumocyte is supported by the type 2 pneumocyte. Type 2 pneumocyte is a supporting cell, and also it is a very important cell to produce a substance called the surfactant. Surfactant is produced by this particular type 2. When the type 2 pneumocytes are not there, the surfactant is not produced. And the surfactant is required to keep the alveoli open. Without the surfactant, the alveoli air bubbles collapse, just like a collapsed balloon without the air. So the surfactant is not there when the type 2 pneumocyte is overwhelmed, apoptosed, and killed. This virus directly attacks that particular type 2 pneumocyte. Its favorite friend or the foe or enemy in our body is the type 2 pneumocyte. Why that is showing the predilection? Because it is having the ACU2 inhibitor and ACU2 enzyme, and also it has got the transmembrane serine protein. Because it has got the receptor and also the protein which cleaves the spike there and allows it to come and grab. Okay. Now what happens? The other cell that is affected is the endothelial cell of the alveolar capillary. Both on the air side and on the blood side, the cells are affected. The endothelial cell, once it is affected, it becomes apoptosed and damaged, and they are very tightly packed endothelial cells. They gape. There will be a gaping of the endothelial cells and molecules, chemokines, chemicals leak from the blood into the alveoli. This is called alveolar flooding. What is happening? There is no surfactant. So alveoli on one hand, they cannot open. On the other hand, whatever the alveoli are open, they are being filled with fluid, a useless inflammatory fluid, very rich in lymphocytes, monocytes, neutrophils, macrophages, dendritic cells, all sorts of inflammatory cells. Who is asking them to come? Little bit initial infection produces some chemokines. These go and call all the cells from the cell, and they cannot come into the alveoli normally. But the endothelial cell is attacked with the virus, so gates there are open. Through that, all these cells come and do sort of one T20 match in the alveoli. All these things will be playing the match. Whether it's a lot of dead cells, this one, pus, and also, fluid, chemicals, every damn thing is there. What are those chemicals? Tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1, interleukin 6. All these are cytokine release by enhances inflammatory response. What is this? This is immune inflammation. Our own immune cells, our own T cells, our own neutrophils, our own macrophages are producing excess of these things. Why this is happening? For example, in our body, whenever there is an immune response, there will be a regulator gene. These are called the T regulator cells, just like the T helper cells, T killer cells, T memory cells, T regulator cells, 4 types. One is called a helper cell, which helps in the control of any infection. T killer cells will attack the organism and then engulf it and kill it. And the memory cells will keep a memory of the copy of the particular virus. When it again comes, it produces again T and B cell response and tries to attack. And the 4th one is called the TR cell, which is the regulator cell. This regulator cell will tell the body when to stop, when not to produce excess chemicals, excess cells to be recruited there. But unfortunately, this virus goes and switches off the T regulator gene. See how clever it is? It is switching off the interferon. It is switching off the regulation of the inflammation. When the regulation of inflammation is not there, there is what is called a cytokine excess or excess inflammatory response. For in excess, then what is required to tackle the little bit virus is there. So this is a sort of mismatch between the viral load and the response that is occurring. This is also, in other terms, simple terms, is called cytokine storm. So this is the second mechanism. Okay, you can see the type 2 pneumocyte and type 1 pneumocyte and the gaping in the alveoli there, increased vascular permeability, recruitment and influx of the monocytes and neutrophils produce the neotosis. These neotosis will interfere with the coagulation. Once there is a neotosis is there, these inflammatory molecules, as you all know, our blood is in circulation because there is no activation of coagulation within the vascular compartment. But when does the blood coagulate? When there is an intrinsic factor when there is an intrinsic pathway or when there is an extrinsic pathway. Intrinsic pathway is intrinsic to the blood vessel. Extrinsic pathway, the tissue factor from the damaged tissues. Suppose I have a cut, there will be damaged tissues. Tissue factor will come, ask the clotting to come and then stop the bleeding. Likewise, there is intrinsic pathway also is there. This neotosis is favoring the intrinsic pathway stimulation and interferes the anticoagulation mechanism there. So much so, what will happen? There will be pulmonary thrombosis. What sort of thrombosis? Not like the embolic thrombosis we get in pulmonary embolism. Let us say somebody has got a clot in the right atrium and there is atrial fibrillation. The clot gets dislodged and enters the lung and produces pulmonary embolism. Or somebody has got a DVT in the leg and the DVT clot traverses via the inferior vena cava, enters the right atrium, and then that goes into the lung circuit through the pulmonary artery. That is an embolic thrombosis, thromboembolism there. This is not thromboembolism. It is microthrombosis. That means small clots are formed in the capillary. It is more a capillary microangiopathy rather than a macro occlusion of a major artery or a branch of the pulmonary artery, major blood vessel. It is a microscopic damage to the microcirculation there. Pulmonary microangiopathy, microthrombosis is the pathology. Who is triggering it? Our own cells, our own inflammatory cells, molecules like from the monocytes, neutrophils, dendritic cells, macrophages, they leak. Why they leak? Normally they are not supposed to leak. But the capillary endothelium is damaged. They enter into the blood. And who is opening the gate there? The virus attacks the capillary cell, endothelial cell, and opens the gate, endothelial dysfunction. This is what is called the immune thrombosis. This is the mechanism of immune microthrombosis, microclots. Okay. Now you can see more clearly here, type 1 pneumocyte. Type 2 pneumocyte is the one that is infected on the left-hand side top, and there is a horizontal one which is called the type 1 pneumocyte. And this triggers inflammatory responses, TNF-alpha, interleukin 10, the macrophage chemotactic factor protein 1, interleukin 1b, all these things. And the nuclear factor kappa B, reactive oxygen species are activated, cell dies, cell apoptosis, cell death. So the lung cells, alveolar cells are no longer functioning as live cells to transmit the oxygen. They become a sort of layer of fibrin material, and fibroblasts come and intervene between the oxygen transmission. That sets in ARDS, the cytokine storm leading to damage of the type 1 pneumocytes, and along with the endothelial cell inflammation, endothelial dysfunction, endothelial apoptosis, gaping, infected endothelial cell allowing chemical cells into the pulmonary circuit, fibroblast proliferation, and then flooding of the alveoli with the cytokines, with the cells, along with the microcirculatory thrombi in this one. All this sets the stage for a wonderful acute respiratory distress syndrome. Okay, now we need to understand a little bit about the RAS system. The RAS system, as you all know, there is a protein called the angiotensinogen, amino acid sequence called the angiotensinogen in the liver. That when it is acted upon by renin in the juxtaglomerular apparatus, it is converted into angiotensin 1, which is a 10 amino acid peptide, decapeptide. Then this angiotensin 1 will go to the lungs. And in the lung, the angiotensin 1, 2 amino acids are reduced. It becomes an octopeptide, which is angiotensin 2. This is being done by the cells which have got the angiotensin converting enzyme receptor cells in the lung. As I told you, this particular process normally also occurs, majority of that, 80% of that occurs in the lung. What is the end product? From angiotensinogen in the liver, in the lung, angiotensin 2 is produced. Finally, this is an octopeptide or 8 amino acid peptide. Okay, so far so good. Then what happens then? So first one is the globular protein, that is like, folded dhoti, and then once the dhoti is opened up for wearing, that is an open chain decapeptide, and then becomes octopeptide or 8 amino acid peptide. Then this ATE2 or angiotensin 2 is the most dangerous molecule we have. What does it do? It has got 2 receptors, AT1 and AT2. If it acts on the AT1, it is harmful. If it acts on the AT2, it is beneficial. Normally, there is a balance between AT1 and AT2. In people who are hypertensive and people who are prone more for cardiometabolic diseases, they have AT1 population more, so much so the harmful effects are more. We use ARDs, losartan, valsartan, candesartan, telmisartan, these act on the AT1 and block the AT1. See that the AT2 does not produce harmful effects. That's why they are so good drugs. Whereas we also have the drugs like ACE inhibitors, which inhibit the ACE enzyme and prevent the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. These are the ramipril, captopril, enalapril, perindopril. All those prils are ACE inhibitors. And here the blockers, ARB blockers are the sartans. Okay, what is AT4? We do not know what is its role in human beings. And also this AT2 not only acts on the AT1, it also acts on the aldosterone pathway and produces excess aldosterone, which retains water, which retains minerals, which increases fluid, which increases the blood pressure. That is why angiotensin 2 is real tension. Tension, all that is due to the angiotensin 2. By two mechanisms, AT1 and aldosterone. But the body knows that it doesn't want the AT2 to be more, so it tries to inactivate the AT2 once it is in excess and then cleaves it into a smaller molecule, which is called the AT179. So this is the pathway of catabolism of the angiotensin 2, so that the angiotensin will not last long there and produce all the bad effects. What are the bad effects? Vasoconstriction, SNS, sympathetic nervous system activation, tachycardia, and then all the sympathetic problems, and mineralocorticoid activation, aldosterone. Now we have a mechanism of making it into a smaller molecule. This molecule you can see here, angiotensin 1 has become angiotensin 2, and this angiotensin 2 acts on AT1 or AT2, AT3, AT4, AT4 are prothrombotic in nature. And what happens? This ACE2, which is our primary target cell, that is the enzyme which converts angiotensin 2 to angiotensin 1,7. It is also 8 amino 1 to 7. One more amino acid is removed and it is converted into angiotensin 1,7. Whereas ACE enzyme is required to convert, ACE1 is required for angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. For angiotensin 2 to the cleavage path 1,7, this 1,7 is a good fellow. Once one amino acid is removed, angiotensin 1,7, it acts on MASR receptors, MAS receptors. These MAS receptors are endothelial favorable, vasodilatation, decreasing proliferation, decreasing cell migration, anti-inflammatory, anti-thrombotic, good cardiac effects, anti-hypertrophic, anti-fibrotic, anti-inflammatory. Everything is good. So angiotensin 2 to the extent required body is kept, and then ACE2 converts that into a favorable molecule to act on the MAS receptor. What our virus is doing? Our virus is going and sitting on the ACE2 receptor and pushing them into the cell. So ACE2 enzyme is not available to cleave the angiotensin 2 and make a protective molecule or angiotensin 1,7. So what happens? Then angiotensin 1 will be more, it acts on AT1 receptor and produces all the havoc. You can nicely see here. In this, the virus is attaching to the ACE2. So this ACE2 population, it should be on the surface of the cell to act. But if the virus takes the ACE2 inside, that means it digs inside and then encloses the receptor into that. This is called endocytosis or internalization of the receptor. When the receptors are not available, angiotensin excess occurs because angiotensin 2 is not converted into a favorable molecule, angiotensin 1,7, which acts on the MASR receptors, which are favorable. So SARS-CoV virus, through the third mechanism, intelligently switches off the ACE2 mechanism by attacking the very ACE2 cell, which has got the important enzyme which will cleave the angiotensin 2 into a favorable molecule. If that cleavage is not occurring, then what is happening? Angiotensin 2 will be more, and this angiotensin 2 acts on the AT1 receptors, produces cytokines, produces tumor necrosis factor alpha, vasoconstriction, hypertension, damage, tachycardia, CNS activation, mineralocorticoid activation, overflow, flooding of the lungs with fluid, all that will occur. All this is being done by the SARS-CoV virus. So look at the very important thing is MASR. This MASR receptors are the ones which are very favorable. Why women are suffering less in the pandemic? Because the expression of the massa receptors is maximum in women compared to a same age person. If same age person has got 10 receptors, women have 30 receptors. I'm just comparing 1:3 is the ratio of mass receptors. It is not estrogen dependent. Even postmenopausal women also, post-hysterectomy women also are protected because of the genetic preponderance of mass or receptors. Whatever little angiotensin 1:7 is available, there are more receptors, more favorable effect. So that is how you need to know the gender difference in the attack here. Now, the summary of all that is, I am reading the English here. The pathogenesis of coronavirus disease may be envisaged as dynamic interaction between 4 vicious feedback loops chained or happening all at once. There is a viral loop, hyperinflammatory loop, non-canonical renin-angiotensin axis loop, which we just now discussed, and the hypercoagulation loop, all occurring. Viral inflammation, the RAS loop, and then the hyperinflammation and the lot of cytokine storm, and the immune coagulation or thromboinflammation, thrombosis, microthrombosis or hypercoagulation. The acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus lights the wick by infecting the alveolar epithelial cells, that is called the alveolar epithelial cells, AECs, and down-regulating the angiotensin converting enzyme 2, balance angiotensin 1:7 mass R1 axis. That means mass R1 is not available for good function, more of angiotensin 2 is available, and the viral feedback loop includes evading the host's innate response, uncontrolled viral replication, turning on a hyperactive adaptive immune response. The inflammatory loop is composed of exuberant inflammatory response feeding back until exploding in an actual cytokine storm. Downregulation of the ACE2 angiotensin 1:7 mass 1 or axis leaves the lung without the critical defense mechanism and turns the scale to the inflammatory side of the ROS. The coagulation loop is the hypercoagulable state caused by the interplay of the inflammation and the endless coagulation feedback loop, which is triggered by the neotosis and all the cytokines there and the endothelial dysfunction and capillary permeability. This results in microclots in the lung. The result is hyperinflammatory, hypercoagulable state, producing an acute immune-mediated lung injury. Eventually, the lung is so flooded with fluid, fibroblasts, and then no surfactant, not able to open, no perfusion, no ventilation. Ultimately, lung suffers acute respiratory distress syndrome. Okay? Now, this is the same story which we have seen earlier also, same angiotensin 1 to how it comes, and nothing much new in this slide. And then in diabetics, this is further worse. Person has got diabetes, the exposition of the ACE2 receptors itself is a little poor. In diabetics, obese people, and then obstructive sleep apnea, and then also hypertension. The TMPRS activity is also higher in these people. So the proteolytic enzyme which opens the door, the chavi, that also is rather there in that. So there are other chemokine receptors called the CCK9 and CXCR, which is called the chemokine receptor type 6 and type 9. These will produce endothelial dysfunction and open the endothelial gates. So SARS-CoV virus entering there, viral replication, and the stimulation of the interferons is halted there, cytokine secretion from the directly through the in the cell, and also from the macrophages, from the T cells, from the polymorphs, from the activated T cells, all leading to excess cytokines, T cell and B cell. You may ask me, what is the type of immunity the COVID mounts? It is both T cell as well as B cell. That's why late phases, 3 or 4 weeks later, we see the antibodies, and also there is immune depletion of the T cells. The first indicator in a COVID patient is lymphopenia. People who have lymphopenia do fairly badly and go into critical stages of disease. The easiest marker is look at the leukocyte count, differential count, lymphopenia, leukopenia, you are in for trouble. How much? Normally around 25 to 30 lymphocytes. In these people 10, 8, sometimes 4 also I have seen. No lymphocytes at all. Not only the circulating lymphocytes, the T cells also are. I told you T cell regulatory gene is switched off, killer cells are more, and then B cell recruitment is late, so antibodies are not coming in the early part and they're not attacking the virus. So what is the end result? The lung, ARDS, necrosis, tissue damage, tissue destruction, influx of materials, leukocytes, dilatation of the blood vessels, and then a lot of flooding of the material. And also efficiency of the current medical therapies, the antivirals and antibiotic and therapeutic treatment window is only here. If we can prevent the immune inflammation, we will prevent ARDS, we will prevent the cytokine storm. So now you ask me what are the various tissues that are having the ACE cells. Nasal, that's why the nasopharynx is the first one that is affected. Lung, ileum, heart, eye, liver, bladder, kidney, pancreas, brain, prostate, testis, placenta. You may be able to see two types of dots, a green dot and a brown dot. Green dot is the ACE2 receptor. The brown dot is the TMPRSS protein. Whenever the TMPRSS protein is there, that tissue only it can attack because it has to open the spike and then make it available. So what are they? They are the lung, basically. If it is in the nasal, nothing happens because there is no ACE2 receptor there. Only the TMPS is there. Whereas if both the dots are there, such tissues are vulnerable. It can produce retinal changes, it can produce cardiac changes, it can produce renal changes, it can produce various other tissues like ductal epithelium and in the pancreas and worsen the diabetes. And it can enter on the various other tissues. In placenta, only the ACE receptor is there, but the TMPRSS is not there. That is why we are not seeing any sort of damage in the obstetric front. So this diagram clearly explains what are the cells which have got the ACE2 along with the TMPRSS. If both are there, that tissue is vulnerable. The best tissue for that available for the virus is the lung. Okay. Now, the TMPRSS is the protein which opens the gate by unlocking the spike protein and proteolizing it. Once that enters, then that ACE2 receptor are buried inside. Lymphopenia, myeloid activation occurs, cytokine storm occurs, direct viral elevation, rhabdomyolysis. All these things will produce hypercoagulable state through the reduced level of the angiotensin 1,7 and MAS receptor activity, and complement activation occurs, and then hypercoagulable microangiopathy leads to lung injury, acute cardiac injury, sepsis, hypoxia, hypotension, acute tubular necrosis due to interstitial inflammation, podocytopathy, what are called the podocytes on the basement membrane of the things, and then microangiopathy of the blood of the things there. All these things together damage the kidney. So what is the first organ damage? The lung. And then immune inflammation, thrombocytosis, thrombosis, immune thrombosis, rhabdomyolysis. That's why extreme weakness. You see patients complain 3 weeks, 6 weeks because of the muscle weakness, because of rhabdomyolysis. And in fact, we have patients who are lost 8 to 9 kilograms of weight in about a matter of 1 month. Okay, loss of weight, asthenia, are because of the rhabdomyolysis. Acute tubular injury to the kidney results in acute kidney shutdown, and also acute cardiac injury producing acute coronary syndromes also are known to occur. All because these tissues harbor the muscle, the lung, the kidney, and the heart harbor both ACE2 receptor as well as the TMPRSS also. Okay. So hyperglycemia results in these people. Already the diabetic fellow is hyperglycemic, and on top of that we are going to give steroids as the treatment, and COVID itself produces hyperglycemia. All this results in endothelial dysfunction, microthrombosis and macrothrombosis, multi-organ damage, increased insulin resistance, increased requirement for insulin. What this tells me, any patient who is moderately diseased, not the mild disease fellow, in the moderate category, you have to shift on to insulin, as though you do in the when there is a surgery or when there is myocardial infarction. No COVID patient of my moderate, severe, critical should be managed on oral drugs. Immediately, a basal insulin of 10 to 12 units or whatever is the dose, Lantus or Glargine followed by Actrapid 3 times a day to titrating according to the blood sugar. Not getting controlled, CISI, that is continuous insulin infusion. See, that is continuous insulin infusion, control the blood sugar. Very important, otherwise we will lose the patient. So what are the tissues now? Epithelial cell type 2, that is the pneumocyte type 2, which is the surfactant producing cell, the renal tubular cell, further damaging the mesangial cell of the kidney, and also the podocytes, vascular smooth muscle cell, endothelial cells of the alveoli, and the intestinal cell. That's where diarrhea is caused in some of these people, cardiomyocytes producing cardiac dysfunction, all these ending up in decreased GFR, proteinuria, hematuria also in people who have tubulopathy. Okay. Now, SARS-CoV infection, hyperinflammation, organ injury, and fibrosis on one side. You want to give dipeptyl peptidase inhibitors, DPP4 inhibitors, your sitagliptin, your vildagliptin, and whatever you are using, the Janumet or whatever are the brand names, they're anti-inflammatory, anti-proliferative, anti-fibrotic. But remember, in moderate and severe cases, no oral anti-diabetic drug. And until the COVID resolves, DPP4 inhibitors, SGLT inhibitors are rather not recommended. They're not contraindicated, but the recommendation goes better not give SGLT, empagliflozin and all that, or your DPP4, vildagliptin, sitagliptins and all, don't give. Or GLP-1 analog exenatide also don't give. Then what do I give? Give metformin, safer, unless there are other contraindications. Give glyburide, those things are also okay. And thioglytamine is so good to tackle this immune inflammation. Okay, the drug of choice, oral drug, if at all you want to use in the milder cases and after the recovery, is pioglitazone, metformin, sulfonylurea to some extent. Sulfonylurea not the greatest. Of course, insulin is the mainstay of treatment. Okay. Now you see, day 1 COVID exposure has occurred. Now the presentation of symptoms, first symptoms, dyspnea comes in day 10, and the critical period is 5 to 18 days. Day 12 hospitalization, day 13 ARDS. So watch out between day 5 and day 18. Majority of the patients, 95% of the patients develop complications. If 100 people are exposed and infected and show a positive test or a symptom, and 85% of them are mild illness. They do not require anything. They manage their inflammation. They manage their microthrombus. 15% of them may require hospital admission. Out of them, 5% require intubation or non-invasive ventilation. If somebody is on the tube, the mortality is as high as 40 to 50%. Okay, diabetics have a higher mortality, particularly type 1 diabetics are having a higher mortality. If you go on to the left side diagram, it is handwritten diagram nicely for you. The first thing is SARS-CoV virus, multi-system, multi-organ failure is the end result. How it occurs? Enters the lung through the tracheobronchial tree, and then the entry into the lung, ACE2 receptor, and there is a lot of cytokines, immune inflammation, thrombosis, kidney injury, cardiac injury, fever because of the brainstem is affected, and difficulty in breathing because of increased water and fluid in the alveoli, and the alveolar walls are damaged, the capillaries also are damaged, and all this leads to SIRS, that is, circulatory system is compromised, and then the flooding of the system and leaking of the capillaries, vasculopathy, drop of blood pressure, drop of blood volume, hypoperfusion, multi-organ failure. And the type 2 cell, type 2 pneumocyte is the target cell. That is the thing. Now, you look here, immune damage, SARS-CoV virus entry and replication, antigen presentation, cellular immunity, humoral immunity. Both are triggered. So I can pick up see why I cannot have a blood test for this particular disease. There is no antigen detection test. You can't detect just like the NS1 antigen you detect for your dengue. You can't detect because the viremia occurs in the asymptomatic state. Before the patient becomes symptomatic itself, the viremia comes and goes. It's a very short-lived viremia, and that also the level of the viremia is very low. So the detection potential of any test should be very difficult to detect. That's why we don't have a virus detection test in the blood so far. Main target organ is the ACE2 cell, particularly in the lung, kidney, heart, muscle, things like that. Now, what do I have? I can give the interferon alpha from outside and prevent the viral replication. I can give corticosteroids to reduce the immune inflammation. I can give immune IVIG, that is the immune globulin, lab manufactured one. I can give antivirals like remdesivir. Now you understand. You might be knowing. Yesterday it was FDA approved. The one and only antiviral drug that is accepted by the FDA is remdesivir. It was approved yesterday. The study was published in JAMA. Beautiful study which said remdesivir definitely works. So forget about flavipiravir, oseltamivir, or topinavir, or ritonavir. All those things are proved to be useless. This is the only antiviral as on date approved from yesterday onwards. Tocilizumab, and the immune inflammation cannot be controlled by corticosteroids, you have to put them on a powerful immune suppressant with added disadvantages of immune suppression, bacterial infection, and all that. How do I monitor? By looking at the procalcitonin, by looking at the clinical symptoms, by also looking at the leukocyte count and CRP. I will be able to understand whether there is bacterial inflammation also. Of course, CRP is elevated even in the COVID without bacterial infection. Chloroquine is another drug which interferes with the cytokine formation, particularly hydroxychloroquine to some extent. There are several statins that are being tried to prevent the immune inflammation. There are other newer drugs also coming. So far what we have to prevent the blood coagulation, low molecular weight. So what are the 4 agents I have? One is the antiviral agent remdesivir, 2 the tocilizumab, if I have 2 corticosteroids, dexamethasone. It's not controlled by that. In selected cases only tocilizumab, and then I have also got the low molecular heparin to prevent the microthrombosis. And of course the oxygen, judicious use of oxygen very early in the disease to tackle the pathology. So this summarizes that. So the pre-symptomatic state, fever, cough, myalgia state, hypoxia, respiratory failure state, acute respiratory distress syndrome state, and recovery state. That is how the SARS virus availability in the nasopharynx. It is highest in the first and second week, and comes down by 3rd week, and almost drops by 24 days, becomes negative, usually by 21 days. Antivirals, if you want to give, not after 14 days, because viral replication is not occurring after 14 days. Any antiviral medication, hydroxychloroquine, can be given in the first 5 days, and then remdesivir, and then once the patient is admitted, it is IV 200 milligrams first day followed by 100 milligrams IV. Convalescent plasma, ICMR has removed it from the list of medication, convalescent plasma day before yesterday. Till then it was there as an approved treatment, but some countries, some institutions are still using it. If at all it has to be used, you have to select the proper donor, match him, and the donor must have higher titers of antibodies, and then he should be in the 4th or 5th or 6th week of the disease, not in the 1st and 2nd week after the cure. And such a convalescent plasma, if given very early, is useful. It is useful only when the virus is multiplying. When the virus is not multiplying, there is no role for convalescent plasma. In fact, ICMR has struck it out as a treatment approved or even sort of emergency use authorization for convalescent plasma. Immunomodulators, for dexamethasone, and very few selected cases, tocilizumab. All other adjuvants you give, zinc, this, that, B complex, inhalation, whatever you want to do, you give. Antibiotic, unless there is indication, there is no role for antibiotic. Unless the procalcitonin is raised, unless leukocytosis is there, unless there is an inflammatory bacterial infection going on, better not to use antibiotic. So you can see again the same thing, viral response comes down from the start to the 2nd week, and then the 3rd week, 1st week onwards, the inflammatory response increases. Stage 1 is mild infection. Stage 1 is confined to the upper respiratory tract and the tracheobronchial tree. This is called the stage of ILI-like illness, influenza-like illness. And stage 2 is the pneumonia phase, where you have 2A and 2B, 2A without hypoxemia, 2B with hypoxemia. Stage 3, patient has got hyperimmune inflammation, cytokine storm, thromboembolic complications, and intravascular thrombosis. D-dimer is positive, fibrinogen is elevated, all the inflammatory markers are raised, interleukin levels are very high, IL-6, and then patient is getting into ARDS, requires either NIV or an intubation. So if at all we want to give remdesivir, the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days. Low molecular heparin, again 5th day to 15, 20th days. And then dexamethasone, again from the 5th day to 15th to 20th day, depending on the need. Oxygen, whenever there is hypoxemia. So this slide summarily tells what treatment we applied at what stage of the disease. Hydroxychloroquine, before the remdesivir, one may try. Don't ask me about ivermectin. Ivermectin is not a drug to be used because the doses required are 48 and above milligrams. What we can use clinically is 12 milligrams. So it is not used. So I'm not going into treatment details very much. Anyway, understand the disease has got asymptomatic and the symptomatic stage 1 to 7 days. Then that is ILI-like illness. Then the early pneumonia without the sort of without the hypoxemia, where hydroxychloroquine may be helpful. And then the later part is don't combine the remdesivir with hydroxychloroquine. Studies have shown that it is detrimental. And then immunologic phase, of course, throughout you have to use the steroids and necessarily, if needed, may be used tocilizumab. Shock, ARDS, multi-organ failure have to be treated. So this is again almost the direct cytotoxic effect, dysregulation of the RAS and switching of the T regulator genes, endothelial cell damage, producing cytokines, fibrinolysis and thrombin production, and then the dysregulated immune response, the 4 horses, which we have looked at. For all this, the help is done by the TMPRSS. That is the culprit fellow who is like our own person trying to cheat our own cell by allowing the virus to come inside. And then the genomic release and the genomic replication, translation, all this occurs because it is a positive strand virus. It doesn't require a separate equipment, and the Xerox copies can be made of this without any trouble. And then the neutrophil is the central cell along with the macrophage that is recruited. Complement is also involved. You can see alveolar flooding of the blood there, and then sort of fluid also is there. So I think the TH cells are cytokine production cells. T regulator cells, I'm telling you about the TR cells are T regulator cells, and CTL are the killer cells, and the TFH are the antibody producing cells, and memory cells, T memory cells and B memory cells to remember the viral infection. We are not at very sure what is the memory we have in this particular disease. It is estimated up to 6 months the memory antibodies may be there. At the moment, we have to leave the virus epidemic for a longer while, and maybe next year by this time, we know the status of our memory. Okay, now you see here, normally thrombosis, whenever it is occurring, inflammation is now usually not there. There are very few conditions where thrombosis and inflammation occur together. So you can see a host of the conditions: TP, TTPase, hemolytic uremic syndrome, antiphospholipid syndrome, deep vein thrombosis, thrombophlebitis, biomaterial, sepsis, IR injury, sickle cell disease, trauma, preeclampsia, severe. All these are conditions where there could be thrombosis and then the inflammation can occur together. This is one disease. There is maximum both thrombosis and inflammation are occurring. This is what is called the thromboinflammation. So vascular endothelitis, platelet activation, viral RNA, DNA, that is neutrophil entrapment, this one netosis, von Willebrand factor. This is a macro von Willebrand factor here. Factor 9 is also incriminated here, thrombin and fibrin actions, endothelial dysfunction, altered blood supply. Okay, immune responses to COVID, there could be a low viral titer and patient may have mild illness, may become normal and then recover, or may have immune activation, high cytokines, CD4, CD8 T cells, neutrophils are depleted, CD4 cells are depleted, CD8 cells ratio is altered, cytokines, particularly interleukin 6, interleukin 10, TNF alpha, all these things are increased, cytokine storm, high viral titer in a sort of very unfavorable host leads to severe disease that can enter into acute lung injury, septic shock, MOD, multi-organ damage, and then the coagulopathy and death.